We all know that there are two Jack Torrances in The Shining, the present-day Jack Torrance and the previous incarnation of Jack Torrance seen in the final photograph, dated 4th of July 1921. Kubrick himself said that the photograph seen in that final shot was supposed to indicate a reincarnation of Jack. But most people who analyze the film to death have apparently idiotically forgotten that America was undergoing prohibition throughout the 1920s and into the 1930s. So the party that takes place, the ghost party that Jack walks into in the Gold Room, where he meets Delbert Grady for the first time, does not take place in the 1920s, as many stupid people assume. It actually takes place in 1934, which is why Stanley Kubrick picked the song Midnight with the Stars and You, which was released in 1934, and, for those of you who are ignorant when it comes to your own American history, Prohibition in America ended in December 1933. Prohibition began in January 1920, and it ended in December 1933. So, this is a theory which apparently has never, ever been articulated or even thought of before. Suffice it to say that while Prohibition was in effect, there was no alcohol being served in hotels in America from January 1920, till December 1933. The ghostly party that Jack enters in the Gold Room took place in 1934, the year after Prohibition ended, which is also the same year, as I've mentioned just now, that the song Midnight with the Stars and You was released. This is why Kubrick picked that particular song. It came out the very next year following the end of Prohibition. I just have to keep repeating that so you get it. The fact that the guests are dressed like flappers from the Roaring Twenties, even though it's 1934, simply means it was a costume party, which fits the supernatural elements of the scene and the story perfectly. Because the hotel's malevolent forces, the demons, are dressed in the costumes of deceased people, like Lloyd and Delbert, so to speak, to lure and goad Jack into committing murder. These aren't actually Lloyd and Delbert. The actual souls of Lloyd and Delbert are no longer at the hotel. It's the demons that give the hotel its dark powers that are now dressed in the costumes of Lloyd and Delbert in order to trick Jack. Similarly, the Grady twin sisters, those are not the real girls. The real girls are probably in heaven. It's the hotel's demons masquerading as the girls to lure Danny. But that's a whole other subject. So I think the 1921 version of Jack Torrance, the previous incarnation of Jack, was a very wealthy man who took up a position as the hotel's caretaker throughout the 1920s, all the way until at least 1934. Not because he needed the money, like the modern 1979 version of Jack, but because he loved the hotel so much and wanted to spend as much time as possible while he was alive, you know? Maybe he needed the money also after the great stock market crash of 1929, which explains why Jack has to inquire from Lloyd as to how good his credit is at the hotel. It's a throwback to having lost his wealth during the Great Depression. So this is why he is told that he has always been the caretaker, by the apparition taking the form of Delbert. He has been the caretaker for around 1.5 decades, as of 1934, the time in which the sequence is set, going back to at least 1921, when the photo in the final shot of the film was taken. Thus, the film is also about lost wealth and an attempt by Jack to reclaim the status he once enjoyed back in the good old days, the hotel's heyday. I think it's very possible that the previous incarnation of Mr. Torrance drank himself to death, either in 1934 itself, or not long after. He had to endure the prohibition for 14 years, remember, and was probably driven insane by not having easy access to alcohol. So when he says he would give anything to have a drink, it's not just modern-day 1979 Jack talking, it's also a throwback to his previous 1920s incarnation during the Prohibition. People often overcompensate for what they lacked or missed over an extended period of time. Jack could have gone berserk and drunk too much after Prohibition ended, and alcohol started flowing freely in the hotel again. Did you get that? Once alcohol started flowing freely in the hotel again, from 1934 onwards, Jack overcompensated for having to be mostly sober in the 1920s, when the only way to drink would have been illegally, bootleggers and whatnot. So he was really driven bonkers in the 1920s already, during Prohibition, and he just drank himself to death once alcohol started flowing freely in 1934. Jack Nicholson, the actor, was born in 1937, I believe, which fits this timeline perfectly. If we consider 1937 to be the year that The Shining's Jack Torrance was born as well. The previous incarnation of Jack died in 1934, or around that time, in the mid-1930s, only to be reborn as Wendy's husband Jack in 1937. Now, I don't think Jack was reborn into his own family, as certain people have said. He was reborn as a Mr. Torrance all over again, nevertheless, because his soul was so attached to the identity of Mr. Torrance, by which he was known at the Overlook. Reincarnation is ultimately about attachment or reattachment. I was born in Sri Lanka, which is a Buddhist country, so even though I was raised Catholic, I know all about reincarnation, but most Americans don't know anything about it. Putting it another way, reincarnation is the same thing as reattachment, if you want to get into the spiritual and metaphysical specifics. At any given point in time, there are many unrelated people who have the same name, even today. But speaking supernaturally, if someone is born again with the same name, it's because their soul sought out the same identity, but not necessarily the same family. This whole family generational trauma thing is maybe a theme in Stephen King's original novel, but that's not what the movie is. The movie is only based on the novel, it's not a recreation of the novel. And I know there are certain Shining fans who love to push the generational trauma angle, but that's not what this is about. Danny is not going to grow up to become a drunk like his father. No, that's not what this movie is about. Now, what I've said about Jack being reborn as a Mr. Torrance is also applicable to Delbert Grady being reborn as Charles Grady. It's not the same bloodline as some people think. This movie is not about bloodlines. It's only maybe patriarchal fans who love the idea of family and blaming it on, inherited family traits that push that theory. So anyhow, I think this video was short, concise, and to the point. Let me know if you have any questions.